Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone, welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I'm your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we are here to ask the question, what is next for your digitized supply chain? A digitized supply chain refers to the integration of digital technologies and data-driven processes throughout the various stages of the supply chain, from procurement of raw materials to the delivery of finished products to end customers. The goal is to leverage technology to streamline operations, enhance visibility, and improve overall efficiency. Now, some key components of a digitized supply chain include transitioning from manual and paper-based processes to digital data and information management, implementing automation and robotics to perform routine and repetitive tasks. This can include automated order processing, inventory management, and the use of robotic systems in warehousing for picking, packing, and sorting. And along the way, organizations leverage the Internet of Things, integrating IoT devices to collect and transmit real-time data from various points in the supply chain, and then use cloud-based platforms for storage, data analytics, and collaboration tools, not to mention advanced analytics tools to process and analyze large volumes of data generated by the supply chain, implementing blockchain for enhanced transparency and traceability, as well as integrating AI algorithms for predictive analytics. It's a tall order, but essential for operational imperatives like increased efficiency, cost reduction, and risk management, but also strategic advantages in decision making, customer satisfaction, flexibility, and a host of factors that ultimately contribute to the long-term success and competitiveness of your business. So, a lot of things are happening, and the question becomes, what is next for your digital supply chain? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today with a great panel of guests. Ways to integrate internal and external data for greater visibility, applying artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques, and adopting advanced analytics to predict demand and enable proactive decision making. It should be a great session today, and one that can give us some practical grounding to the promise and advantages of digital transformation. But before I introduce our guests, as always, I want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. In fact, we want to know, what are your challenges in digitizing your supply chain? Are you using AI? Where are you in your AI maturity? Is it even relevant? And if you have some questions along the way for our panel, please jump in. I will attempt to get your questions and comments into the flow of the show, and we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, let's bring aboard our guests today, starting with Greg Sloyer. Greg is a manufacturing industry principal at Snowflake. Greg, are you with us? Hello, Greg.
Yes,
Coming
thanks,
in. Are you
Kevin.
with us? Welcome aboard, Greg. Now, Greg has over 16 years in the field of data and analytics, and prior to that, nearly 20 years in the chemical industry. But what's less known about Greg is that he is an accomplished jazz musician. He's toured Europe. He's played the Montreux Jazz Festival, and he's another bass player. So I think that's great. Greg, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Kevin. Looking forward to the discussion.
All right, very good. Now, also joining us today is Mike Mercurcio, a manufacturing program manager at Coca-Cola. Mike, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everyone.
You are. Good morning, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Mike has spent the majority of his career in the food packaging industry at places like Reynolds, Hefty, Greenleaf Foods, and now he's with the beverage industry working with Coke. Mike is also an adjunct professor at the University of Illinois Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering. You work in the capstone department there, Mike, is that right?
Correct. I have a student team every semester, and I am their adjunct advisor.
Nice. Very good. Good work there, Mike. All right. And also joining us today is Patrick Strauss, Chief Intelligent Environments Solutions Officer at Global Logic. Patrick, are you with us?
I certainly am, Kevin. Good morning, everybody.
There you are, dialing in. Fantastic. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick has over 30 years of professional supply chain experience with specific focus on implementing digital transformation. He's worked in manufacturing and retail, as well as supply chains and logistics. But you may not know that Patrick had an opportunity to lead a team working on the world's first human cyborg. Wow. Tell us more, Patrick.
It's right time, right place. Very humble experience. I've met Peter Scott Morgan, who unfortunately suffered from motor neuron disease. And he kind of turned everything on its head by kind of saying, how can we leverage technology innovation for the greater good to drive better quality of life? It's an inspiring activity, and I remember it fondly.
All right. Well, we will look forward to your perspective as well, Patrick. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, Greg and Mike and Patrick. I'd like to draw our attention to an article published recently by trans.info titled 3 Ways AI Will Transform Supply Chains in 2024 and Beyond. Now, the article talks about how the supply chain industry has only scratched the surface of the value that AI can unlock, stressing that data is the backbone of AI, and this industry is sitting on a treasure trove of it. And it means a world of possibilities for innovation in supply chain operations. Look, the article really centered around doing more with real-time integrated data, the ability to accurately predict the future, forecast around various variables like inventory or dwell times, or even determine optimal pricing. So my question to the group is today, the benefits of AI on supply chain seem to be incredibly exciting. Have indeed they only just begun? And in what ways do you feel AI will transform supply chains in 2024 and beyond? Greg, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What do you feel the impacts are?
Thanks, Kevin. There's different points. I mean, I think it was a very good article, and very broad. Excuse me, in the use of that data foundation really being critical for any of these models. A joke I like using is that the square root of a bad number is still a bad number. So that data foundation, that data quality component, is going to continue to be critical. And I think you're going to see a lot more effort now that AI and ML are being adopted more, whether it's experimental or towards production, in refocusing on data quality. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was issues with things like inventory record accuracy. And, MRP, which is not as advanced mathematically as AI and ML, but highly critical, and we use it, every day in manufacturing, relied, if your inventory record accuracy, I'm sure there was publications on this, but, below 85%, MRP was not going to work. And thought those things were solved in the late 90s, early 2000s. They're not. We're still having and finding organizations that struggle with that. And as we build those models, as we use those techniques, whether it's real time or some level of other frequency, having those processes, having that data quality in place is going to be fundamental. Where I'd like to see in 2024 and beyond is, rather than just focusing on, we're going to improve OEE and efficiency and things like that, where can we use AI and ML to help identify and correct data quality problems before it goes into further AI and ML, and advanced analytics and supply chain uses?
Well, using AI to improve AI, I think that's an interesting concept. Patrick, where do you see the transformation of supply chains taking us in 2024 and beyond?
I think I disagree slightly with Greg's view, only because it's kind of personal kind of observations in terms of how to perceive the article. I think the article was okay, but it didn't wow me in the sense of, has it told me anything new, really? And I, with my long experience across a number of industries, I still see very much the same conversations today in supply chain than we had probably 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, we didn't talk about AI. So I think bringing, these new buzzwords in, such as AI, it's very natural. But I think a lot of people even struggle on the first hurdle of the data side. And this is kind of where I fully agree with Greg here in terms of really kind of getting your data house in order. And I think this is where the opportunities lie for pretty much every company, is to understand your data. Now, let's be very, very clear. A lot of our audience here, they have been generating and collecting data for many years. And, they're sitting not in data lakes, they're sitting on data mountains, as I call them. Yeah. So huge amounts of data. So data should not be new. However, what is new is the real clear understanding of what am I going to do with that data? What are these business challenges that I need to really address in my supply chain, where data and where analytics and where AI and whatever else is allowing me to be smarter, cleverer, faster, more decisive in the decision making that I need to do. And that's not here yet. I'm not seeing lots of examples yet at the moment where people switch on to data, even though they have kind of been dealing with data for many years. But I think it comes back to exactly what Greg said, is the fact that if you have bad data from the start, don't assume to get good decisions out of it. You can't. So getting that data house in order is absolutely vital. And this is where I do agree with Greg on that point.
Now, Mike, I do believe that data is the backbone of AI. The article stresses the idea that that data is the backbone of AI, and that the supply chain industry as a whole has got a treasure trove of it. But the question is, what can you do with it? Mike, from your experience, what are some of the benefits of leveraging data in new and more powerful ways in supply chain operations?
You know, the sort of the term that gets tossed around in the industry now is the connected worker. And while that person on the shop floor, you know, master data is your foundation, you want to give them the tools to be successful with accurate and rapid analytics. I think you've kind of heard a theme there from the other two presenters. The fastest growing use case is connecting to your consumer behavior. In the CPG space, trying to predict who buys what and where and why is powerful. And when you apply AI, think of what maybe 3 or 4 domain analysts were trying to do over the course of a week, AI can do in seconds. And that allows you to connect into your supply chain to then take actions to replenish, change schedules, move product around, improve that customer experience. We're just tapping into something that a few years from now, it'll be commonplace, but we're scratching the surface right now.
All right, well, a lot to consider. For folks that are interested in reading that article, there is a link here in the chat feature, 3 ways AI will transform supply chains in 2024 and beyond. Take a look and let us know what you think about that article, and where does it, how does it inform your decision-making process in terms of digitizing your supply chains. But folks, I'd like to move us on to our discussion points today. Our first discussion point is integrating. We're talking more about data integration, integrating internal and external data for greater visibility across the supply chain, the value chain, visibility, decision-making, process optimization. When it comes to this data that we're talking about, what data sources are essential? What should I be considering in my strategies? Patrick, what do you feel are the most important data sources that we should be considering?
So I've done some analysis in the past around this, and I work with Cranfield University from an academic perspective as well. So we know that kind of 20% of data that organizations use are all kind of internal data. So these are your ERP systems, your warehouse management systems, your CMM systems. It's that internal view of kind of what's going on, what comes into your warehouse, what goes out in the warehouse, etc. But that amount of data that I would say a lot of organizations spend millions on IT systems only gives you 20% of real view of what in an end-to-end supply chain really happens. That means 80% of that data does not sit inside your 4 walls. And that kind of very much depends on what is that 80%. And I would say a great majority, and to Mike's point he's just done, is that customer experience. Because for me, you can have the greatest product or service in the world. If no customer is going to buy it, what's the point? And it's a very, very simple kind of, analogy in terms of understand your customer. So for me, customer experience information and data is very much key. That could be social media information, that could be retail information, that could be whatever information that you require to make better decisions. And exactly to the point that I've made earlier on is, what is the business challenge we're trying to address? A lot of organizations really struggle with this very simple question to kind of say, but I already sit on a lot of ERP data, a lot of customer relationship management data, a lot of the warehouse management data. This is fantastic. This is great. It's a starting point. But what you need to understand is that you need to bring other data together with kind of, this 80% kind of view to kind of say, what is this 80% made up of? And it's kind of a balance of kind of how accessible this data is, i.e., is it data that I can just buy in and integrate? How do I integrate it into my existing systems? Or is it something that I need to potentially kind of generate myself using IoT sensors, for instance, to kind of greater visibility and granularity in my supply chain? So very open question, but it's very difficult to give you a succinct answer because it is kind of a different answer to every company and every organization.
Now, Mike, help us understand perhaps the differentiation between internal data and external data. I'm especially excited about, as we were just talking a moment ago, about the Internet of Things and the ability to put sensors along my process chain and really understand that internal data. But external data is also super important. Can you help us understand the differences between the two and the advantages of each and how we can effectively blend internal data and external data?
Sure. And there's actually sort of a twist on external data. You could have numerous vendor partners that are collecting data for you, and you want to share that however you decide to share it, through Snowflake, Power BI, all those things. Getting to that consumer behavior, there's consumer data available. You can buy it, you can source it, you can get it, but you have to bring it in and you have to know what to do with it, as we've sort of identified. When I look at internal data, if you think of the four walls of any processing operation or a plant, there's hundreds of thousands of data tags that most of the controls engineers don't really know what they mean and how they apply. So if you focus on some simple process key parameters and say, am I measuring it or not? And do I have the connected data or not? Do I have it? Or does my vendor have it? Like utilities, like water, like those type of things. Putting it together is the power of this. Simple example, if you have predictive maintenance data and you have operating data and you have quality data, wouldn't it be really cool if you could take AI and say, go find a connected event, see if you found something where one of them drove the other, an event on a line contributed to a quality condition or a repair or lack of repair, or a condition contributed to a downtime event, which may have contributed to a quality condition. That's the uncharted territory. And it's so exciting to get there, but there's a lot of ways to get there.
Is that happening today? Or is this something that we're looking at the future for?
Oh, it's happening today. And depending where you are in maturity of IoT, you're either doing it with your current provider, your ERP or MES provider. You may have picked an integration partner that's doing something with analytics, or you're putting a bunch of pieces together with a master systems integrator, because there is no one end-to-end solution today. There really isn't. There's a lot of people dabbling in it, but the nice part is it's plug and play. Can be plug and play.
Okay. Now, Greg, it seems to me the big value of all of this is really getting greater visibility into the process across the chain, greater visibility to do all kinds of great things like predict and analyze and improve and tighten my processes. What are some of the barriers that we need to overcome to establishing true visibility across the supply chain?
Great question, Kevin. And I think Patrick and Mike have laid out, as sort of the subtext to a lot of what they were saying, some of those barriers. When we talk about the internal data, for example, and Patrick mentioned, hey, you're sitting on a lot of ERP data, SAP, whatever, and we've got that. That is absolutely true. one of the barriers, though, to, again, looking at the internal focus, which tends to be the higher priority as you start along that journey, and then building in sort of the external data on top of that, is if you've got one ERP, it's, you're looking at those impacts between, the back office operations, all those transactions, things like that, and what Mike was mentioning, which is the OT data, the shop floor types of data coming off the floor. So one plant, one ERP. Many manufacturers that we run into, it's multiple ERPs, up into some cases over 100. So sitting on the ERP data is true, but looking at that integrated, ERP data is a big journey. And I challenge folks that say, well, we only have one ERP. And then I go, great, when's your next M&A? Because by definition, you're going to add in a second ERP for some amount of time. And that just starts that whole process over again of how do I look at those supply chain problems, spend analytics, or the sales and the customer 360 when I've got multiple order systems and processes. So I think that's one of the barriers to look at is bringing that data together. And then, stepping along that journey of what's the important data for the partners to provide, whether it's the customers or the suppliers. Back to Mike's example on the predictive maintenance. One of those predictive maintenance type of or quality issues can be, what is my supplier's quality? And what does that look like? And how does that influence my quality, my output, my yields? So that's tightly coupled. And it's not that this is brand new. We've had EDI for over 50 years now, where transaction data has been moving. So it's, an email and CSV files and all sorts of other things. It's really now, how do we do this at speed, at scale, and not just with our favorite customers or suppliers, but across the whole ecosystem? And that becomes part of that challenge. So making sure your systems have that flexibility and scalability to support a lot of that data. And then, and I don't remember if it was Patrick or Mike or both, then you go beyond those partner networks to the data providers. So that's whether that's market data on what your customers, are being influenced by. It could be commodity pricing and transportation rates, and incorporating all that into that decision process and what speeds are necessary for that data and what level of detail based on the types of problems you're trying to solve.
You are here with Digital Transformation Talk, and we are talking about what's next for your digital supply chain. And gentlemen, I'd like to move us on to our next discussion point. It's really related, continuing on with our discussion, really, but I want to understand about real world application of artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques in supply chain operations. We hear a lot about AI, but how is it really being implemented today, and what are the results? And indeed, I'd like to hear from the audience as well. Are you using AI in your supply chain? If so, what are your challenges and what are some of the results? But Mike, can you tell us a little bit more, give us some grounding. How is AI being used today in supply chain operations? And what are some of the results that we can expect?
So let's start with the customer. There was sort of a customer theme. Let's come backwards. There's a lot of work in trying to get predictive consumer behavior, the feature, the ad, the promo, and what's my lift? What's my change in demand? Depending on the size and complexity of your organization, there is a ton of work going on in network optimization, right? You have 100 distribution centers and you have 10,000 products. Think of it as the Amazon network. There's AI, AWS, whatever you want to call it, is just exploding with how do you make smarter decisions about what's moving around. Where I see a lot of excitement in manufacturing when I put on my old engineering hat is this concept of machine learning and teaching a process what variables impact quality and throughput, right? We're here to save money. And letting machine learning control the process drift. So you don't touch it. You let it run. You're inside your upper lower control limits. Let it go. I think the next avenue coming is this bridge into raw material vendors, raw material supply, raw material quality. As Greg was saying, EDI has been around forever. Advanced shipping notice has been forever in the dawn of time with Walmart. We don't exploit those.
Ah, there you are. Sorry, Mike, you froze here for me for a second. All right, well, good points. Again, I am really curious how we might look at 2024 as a transformational year for supply chain operations, and how machine learning and AI can really be applied. Greg, from your experience, what are some of the differences between machine learning and AI that we should be considering, and how can they both be applied in the real world today?
Interesting question. So depending on where you're looking for definitions of these things, I mean, ML is a subset of AI. AI is more of the automation. You think of chat bots and things like that. ML, as Mike was saying, was looking at various different levels of data, whether that's historical or real-time and things like that, and building those algorithms, those models that sit on top and support those decisions, you know, whether it's predictive maintenance or yield or root cause. So one is really a subset of the other, and I wouldn't, you know, there's reasons to sort of separate them, but I wouldn't get too hung up on it in terms of those two-letter acronyms, kind of thing. Where I see us going, you know, and Mike alluded to this, you know, the earliest uses that I've run into in terms of ML, you know, AI is in that improvement of demand planning, forecasting. You know, if you look at almost any of the earnings reports, any of the supply chain types of literature out there, everybody's saying, you know, hey, we're going to improve forecasting. We need to improve forecasting. That's our focus. And whether you need to go all the way to ML tools, or you can take advantage of more of the statistical kinds of tools, you know, really depends on the types of products, the types of markets, the types of customers you've got there, as well as what data is available to help, you know, incorporate into that model process. So I think we're going to continue to see that. Where I'd like to see, you know, well, and then the second stage and what's been deployed, and Mike mentioned this, you know, predictive maintenance. There's some of those shop floor manufacturing types of use cases around quality and yield, and in those areas, really, you know, I'll call them the OEE supporting metrics, where you're driving performance across production lines. There's too many variables. You know, Mike said, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of what they call tags, which is basically sensor data coming off of different components of the shop floor. That's too much data and needs to be answered too quickly to rely on, you know, spreadsheets and humans to be able to do that. It's just not really possible, you know, especially as we look at labor shortages, which impact manufacturing, logistics, supply chain up and down. You just don't have that experience necessarily in all cases. So this is really where ML is taking off with that kind of stuff. Where I'd like to see it go is, I'll call them cross-functional use cases. So we solve forecasting, we solve manufacturing, we solve spend or supply. Great, tremendous amounts of value. Where I see the exponential value going is, how does that forecast error impact my manufacturing schedule, impact my supplier's ability, and the other way around? How did that supply constraint impact my customer service level? We get some intuitive stuff there and visuals and things like that with visibility, but really to build those ML components or AI components, or moving to Gen AI and you know, the latest there, what can I do to look across those functions and really optimize the supply chain, just not functions or components of it?
Now, Patrick, Greg mentions the shop floor, labor shortages, sort of the human parts of it. When we talk about AI, the first thing that comes to a lot of folks' mind is, should I be afraid of losing my job? One of the benefits that we often hear about implementing AI is that we can relieve workers of sort of mundane, repetitive tasks and redeploy them for more high value work, more direct work with customers. Should workers be afraid of losing their jobs? Can you give me an example of a staff redeployment, for example, where workers were moved from, say, the front line to a more higher level job because of the implementation of AI?
So I think this is a really, really good question. And if you look a little bit
Patrick?
historically with any new technology that has come up, there's always the worry about...
I am sorry, folks. I am frozen here. I'm not certain if...
Can you hear me, though?
Kevin, we can hear Patrick.
Yeah.
I am...
Can you see me as well?
I
Yeah,
am frozen
I can,
here, Anna.
Patrick. Keep going.
Okay, I just keep going. Kevin. So there has been historically always been these sort of kind of worries about new technology. And I'll give you a really good analogy here, which is 3D printing. Remember when 3D printing came up? What was the first thing that people said? Lego will be out of business tomorrow. Because by the time everybody can buy their own 3D printers, you can print your own 3D Lego blocks. Now, look where we are in 2024. Lego is going incredibly strong. Look at all the, and you know, I'm not making kind of reference to kind of all the lovely toys you see behind me, but Lego is going very, very strong. So has 3D printing as that revolutionary technology really made an impact in terms of, you know, losing jobs? No, I think what it is kind of allowing new technology to do is kind of really reevaluating where the value can come. And I think I see AI in exactly the same way. So are there worries about losing my job? Certainly not in the short to medium term, for sure. In fact, AI has proven to generate jobs because guess what? In order to do AI well, you need to understand how to program, how to kind of do the data analytics, how to do data science very, very well. And I would say we do not have enough people that really understand AI well, that can actually kind of do all these great, fantastic things that Mike and Greg have already kind of talked about in terms of where the potential value lies. So my answer to you, Kevin, is very simple. Do not be afraid of kind of new technologies such as AI. There is value, and we need to find the people. We need to actually train and upskill people to kind of provide that kind of value to it. And we need to embrace it as well. Long term, of course, we will always see that certain jobs and certain tasks will become obsolete, will become repetitive, and technology will kind of enable a far more automated, a far more slicker, much more decisive outcome. That is very natural. But it's seen over and over again, irrespective of what technologies have come, onto the table here, that there's this hype with it. People are worried about their losing their job, but actually it's exactly the opposite. You need to really understand the technologies to kind of really drive the value. And I see AI very much in the boat in 2024 that we need to find more people to do exactly that.
We are here today with Patrick Strauss, Chief Intelligent Environments Solutions Officer at Global Logic, also Mike Loquircio, Digital Manufacturing Program Manager at Coca-Cola, and Greg Sloyer, Manufacturing Industry Principal at Snowflake. If you have a question or a comment for our guests today, please feel free to enter them into the chat feature. I will attempt to get them into the flow of the show, and we'll have a few minutes at the end here in just a moment for your questions for the group today. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our third discussion topic today, and that is adopting advanced analytics to do things like predict demand and enable proactive decision-making. So my question to you folks, and Greg, I'd like to start with you on this one, is how can organizations be more effective at predictive analytics, doing things like predicting demand, cycle time, downtime, those kinds of things? Any suggestions for organizations struggling to make the most of advanced analytics?
Sure, and I'll build actually off of what Patrick was saying. So there's lots of techniques for forecasting. As we said in the last question, it is a fundamental thing that we've been trying to improve. I was teaching forecasting classes 30 years ago-ish, whatever my age is. And, one of the fundamental things is if we had an accurate forecast, if we had that accurate of a forecast, none of us here would probably be in the industry we're in. We'd be in the stock market, because that's where you're truly making the money on that kind of accurate level forecast. But it's getting better. That's the constant thing with this. And we've got, the traditional statistical techniques, which organizationally, and from the folks that are doing planning, and those are generally easier to understand. So they have been much more widely adopted. As ML is introduced, you can add many more variables. It will generally be a more accurate forecast, depending on how accuracy there is measured, but will generally be, because it's incorporating a lot more data, a lot more information, even if it's simple things like weather data, and how that impacts product demand. If you're, if you sell sports drinks in Florida at when it's 100 degrees out, it's going to be different than, in the summertime versus selling them in Maine in the wintertime. It's just all those things come into play and will help drive that. So there's those components. Does the organization understand the output? Because that goes to adoption of any of these techniques, but especially with forecasting, things like that. We talked about the data quality. That's always going to be there. And the other thing too, again, from a process standpoint, is who is taking advantage, or how is the organization taking advantage of that more accurate forecast? Because there's organizational issues. We called it the one number principle, where when organizations aren't following that, if I generate a great forecast, it's super accurate, but nobody follows it, no decisions are being made based off of it, was all that time and effort to generate a better forecast worthwhile? So I think there's a lot of opportunities from a process standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, to work through, where do I apply simpler techniques? Where can I take advantage of those more complex techniques? And what data do I have, and how do I integrate that in? That is really driving, especially in the area of forecasting, to me, those decisions on how and where to implement.
Mm-hmm. All right, gentlemen, we do have a question coming in from our audience. Laura is asking, or commenting and asking, our company is relatively new to AI. Thank you, Laura, by the way. I wanted to ask the panelists, what are the primary barriers or challenges you've encountered when integrating AI into your supply chain processes, and how are you currently addressing them? Mike, do you have an answer or a comment for Laura?
Great question. Thank you. I would say fall back on some fundamentals. You've heard this theme earlier. Master data, master data, master data. If you're starting this journey, I've never worked on a business system project in my career that master data wasn't a top 3 lessons learned or a top 5 lessons learned. Understand the data, understand what data you want. Your organization probably has been mature on the customer facing piece, but maybe not that mature in the IoT inside the 4 walls of manufacturing or processing. Or maybe you're the reverse. You are leading edge in your manufacturing world, but you're lagging in customer facing. Do not underestimate the OT technology, the IoT. And we haven't really talked about this, but as part of this journey, you have to be absolutely aware of what's going on with cybersecurity. As you're moving data in and out through your firewalls into your OT environment to your customers, cybersecurity has to be mission critical. And you can apply some AI stuff to what's going on with all these software tools that show you who's hitting your network, who's trying to get into your network, what data is moving. Adoption, you have to have a use case that becomes a proof of concept that you could say, yep, we got it and we won. And the other piece I would give anybody who's going to start this journey, do not walk into the CEO's office and say, it's an ROI project. Give me 5 million, I'll give you 10 million. No. Start with use cases, connect edge devices, learn about your data, learn about your opportunities, get a couple of proof of concepts, get a pilot or two, lock it all down, get adoption, then go to your CEO and say, you know what, I need $10 million to do this for the rest of the network. And by the way, let me show you all the success stories. Don't trade it like an ROI. You won't get off ground zero.
Okay. Can I
Patrick, did
jump
you have
in?
something to add? Please.
Yeah, I would love to. So I am not disagreeing with what Mike said. I wholeheartedly actually agree with everything that you said, but I wouldn't even start with a data word personally, because I see this question over and over again across a number of industries. So my answer would be, first and foremost, the why. If you can't answer the why question of why do you need AI, then the rest of any conversation, be it data, OT, IT, technical, security, becomes completely irrelevant. So the first question that everybody should kind of really answer truthfully and succinctly is, why do you want AI? Why do you want IoT? Why do you want blockchain? Why do you want X, Y, and Z? And be really clear about it. Now, this is a very simple question. It is incredibly difficult for organizations to actually agree on why they need it. The second point that I would like to make is culture. Just because you and I understand the value of, let's say, AI or whatever technology, and we love it, and we can see the value, does not mean the rest of the organization will follow suit. So culture is a very vital, important. It doesn't matter if you just one person, 10 people, or 100,000 people globally. Obviously, the bigger the organization, the more complex it will be in terms of that cultural change. But if your organization just from the start is risk adverse, is actually risk against innovation, technology, again, AI will not be kind of the answer to all your problems. So understand the culture and kind of create that culture for change. My last point is, and that goes a little bit kind of to what Mike said right at the end, is any change has to come from the top. Even though you are maybe the person tasked to bring change, transformational change, bring that kind of technology insights in, the change has to come from the top and has to kind of be driven from the top. If that change is not coming from the top, you will not succeed. And I've seen it over and over again that people were recruited in because they're very good at what they are. They're subject matter experts in X, Y, and Z. And they're leaving the business 6, 12 months later because the culture isn't there.
Yeah.
The why question was never kind of really succinctly answered. And most importantly, the CEO and the top people just really had completely different priorities. And this is what you need to navigate. After that, I totally agree with what Mike said. The data becomes your best friend or foe. You need to get your house in order and look at these use cases. Start small, but kind of look at where you want to go.
All right, we are here today with Patrick Strauss, Michael Quircio, and Greg Sloyer. Gentlemen, we have reached the action item round of the program in the time that we have left. Very briefly, I'm wondering if you have a quick action item for our viewers today that they can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice. Mike, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, I like to think about this. Just jump in the pool. Find a use case, get an edge device, connect, see what the data tells you, and learn. Adoption culture is critical. Learn, see if it fits your environment, then build on that. And when you're ready, go get your CEO commitment. Without that, there is no journey. But just jump in the pool. Just go try it.
That is Michael Quircio from Coca-Cola. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today. Patrick, do you have an action item for us?
At the risk of repeating myself, the why question for me is so fundamental. So before you jump in, absolutely no harm in experimenting, getting yourself familiar with. I totally agree with that. But be mindful of where your journey is. Do not do the chase the shiny toy syndrome, which a lot of companies do and kind of create, feeling this FOMO, the fear of missing out. Don't fall into the same trap, but play around with it, familiarize yourself, but always be really aware of where your end goal, your big vision is, and kind of see the path to it. So the why question will lead you to that.
That is Patrick Strauss with Global Logic. Patrick, thank you so much for being with us today. And finally, Greg Sloyer. Greg, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, sure. And I'm glad I didn't get asked the question that Laura had asked, because otherwise I would have stole my thunder from this one. But as that data foundation is being built, have your data scientists, the folks that are in the math and doing the programming and all that, work with business and operations. One of the barriers that I see is that it's too much of a classroom environment for data scientists, and it doesn't apply. What they're doing doesn't get implemented because they didn't apply it in the real world with those folks who've been doing and running that business and understand it. Remember, correlation does not equal causation, but the math doesn't know that. That's the humans know that. And bringing those together is key. So the action item for me is, get the data science, everything Patrick said, absolutely true. Everything Mike said, get the data science, the AI and ML out of the classroom, start small, but have it built with the knowledge base from the folks in the business and operations who have been doing those roles and understand what those answers are saying, and working with those data scientists to make them, viable, usable, reliable models.
That is Greg Sloyer from Snowflake. Greg, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. What a great panel today. Your perspectives and advice were spot on. So thank you so much. I hope that we get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you, too. And join us next week, March 19th, when I have another great panel of guests discussing the topic of changing your transformation narrative from cost to value creation. That should be another great discussion. Now, in the meantime, if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I am happy to connect there. Check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next time, I'm Kevin Crane. Thanks for watching.